night 16 of 31 Wild Halloween Review Nights. If you are just joining us in the middle of this series, welcome. We're halfway through October. You've missed a bit. Today we are continuing the conversation of the Disney Channel original movie series Halloweentown, a story about a family of witches and warlocks, and there's a town called Halloweentown, and the residents are all goblins and monsters and Halloween creatures. Yesterday I talked about the first movie, which I've never seen until when I saw it to make this video, and today we are talking about the sequel, Halloweentown 2: Kalabar's Revenge, which is not the first time that I've seen this film. Believe it or not, as a child I did not watch the first one, but I watched the second one. I said this yesterday. I didn't grow up with the second one, but I did see it when I was younger. I think I saw it twice, so this is the third time in my life I've seen this film. And yeah, that's a common thing with me. I'll just watch things out of order and just not care. If you think that's annoying, I saw Infinity War before I saw the first and second Avenger films. I even saw them before I saw the Iron Man films. That's right, give me hate. Infinity War was my 5th Marvel film I've ever seen. And I'm specifically talking about the MCU. I've seen the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films before that. So those are Marvel films. I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. Released in 2001, it's been 2 years since the events of the first movie, where the Cromwell children took their first adventure to Halloweentown, and the demise of the evil warlock / mayor of Halloweentown, Kalabar. Though when his hidden son Cal, very original name, makes his way into their lives and steals Grandma Aggie's spell book, a spell is put on both the human world and Halloweentown that threatens the livelihood of both humans and monsters. Yesterday, I believe I mentioned that I only remembered 2 bits from this film when I first saw it. I remember there was a bit with socks, and everybody was turning, I think I said black and white, everybody was turning gray. The other thing I remember is people were turning into their costumes at the Halloween party that was thrown in this film. And I didn't go into too much detail. I know I'm jumping way ahead into the story because this happens at the end of the film. But Cal's whole plan is to kind of humanize Halloweentown and spook up the human world, I guess. I gotta be very honest. The plans in these films, I'm a little confused by him. At midnight on this Halloween party, he casts a spell with anybody who's wearing a mask or is in a Halloween costume and turns them into what they are for Halloween. Which, on that topic of that scene, since we are talking about it before I get into what I wanted to say about it, it doesn't make much sense why only some people were turned into their costumes and some weren't. Like, I understand the people who are wearing masks, but then you have this one girl who Dylan's been talking to throughout the film. She's a vampire for Halloween, and she turns into an actual vampire. She's not wearing a mask, she's in a full-blown costume. But then you have people like Sophie, who was a cowgirl. She's not a real cowgirl. Yeah, and there were a mix of individuals who were turned into creatures, some weren't turned into creatures. Unless the spell was only for people who were wearing masks, or dressed up as creepy individuals. Which, if that's the case, congrats on being one of the first and only Halloween parties I know of where almost half of all the guests are some creepy monster. Usually at a Halloween party you have a variety of different things, TV characters or occupations or animals. And I guess now I should probably bring up why I'm talking about this first, because I have a small little fascination and obsession about these kind of stories where you become what you are dressed up as for Halloween, and I think that has something to do with my liking of the Fairly OddParent Halloween episode, Scary Godparents. If you don't know that episode, it's the Halloween episode of Fairly OddParents, obviously, and Timmy wishes that the costumes on Halloween, because they're so bland and stupid looking, he wishes that they were all real and scary looking. So Cosmo and Wanda make it to where whatever you're wearing on Halloween, that is what you are. Yeah, that scene always kind of stuck out to me, probably because I really like that Fairly Odd Parent episode. I guess I should really stick to my notes now and go in order. So thoughts? Well, this was a Disney Channel movie. Disney Channel original movies have a certain look to them. I said yesterday that there's always these stereotypes that you have to look out for, like character motives and story elements. Yeah, this has it. It just has the feel of being a Disney Channel original film. Even the beginning, when Marnie is kind of recapping what happened in the first film, but it had that certain look to it, like you can just tell it was a made-for-TV film. And I find that funny. I find it amusing, and that's something that's very unique about these films, or just about any Disney Channel original movie. They have a certain charm to them. Like when you watch it, you can just instantly tell that you are watching a DCOM. I was a little confused by the age gap as well in this film. It wasn't until I looked it up, and even when it was made very clear by Dylan that it's been 2 years since the last film. I don't think Marnie said it in the recap. I thought it was only just a year. I could have sworn somebody said, you know, this past year's been fun. I think that was the scene with Grandma Aggie looking in on some of her friends from Halloweentown, saying like, oh, this year's been fun. Or I tried putting that together, thinking it's been a year since the last movie. I think it's been a little bit more since a year. Dylan does not seem like he is a year older than how he was in the first movie. The character Cal was interesting. Can I sit here and say I knew he was going to be the villain? Well, I can if I want to sound pretty clever and pretend that I've never seen the film before. Actually, if I gotta be very honest, I actually forgot who the villain was in this movie. Again, I only remembered those two specific parts. And I guess since I did talk about the costume scene, I should talk about the sock scene. What's up with the sock scene? Well, there was a gray spell put on Halloweentown. The character that Grandma Aggie was with, he was a character named Gort, who is this weird junk collecting creature. Anything that gets lost in the universe, both in Halloweentown and in the human world, ends up in his place, and then anything that gets lost in his place disappears forever. And that makes me think, isn't everything in that house lost? It's just clutter. But yeah, the normal version of Gort was he was this very stuffy who was going through socks, and there was no pair of socks. It was just one sock each, because that's the whole thing. If you have a pair of socks and you lose one sock, well, that's where the lost sock goes. So him and Grandma were going through the socks when Grandma became gray and boring. What was I talking about? Cal, yeah. I didn't know who he was. But, I mean, the second that his name was mentioned, Cal, and you put the main villain's name in the title, Kalabar, I mean, I know it's a kid's film, but if you want to be clever with your twists, you should really be a little more creative. That's just me. I mean, somebody could have been like, hey, that was a pretty good idea. And it makes sense because Cal is the son of Kalabar. So, I mean, it makes complete sense. And for somebody who's never seen the film before, they would think, oh, that's pretty unique. But, I don't know, I thought, you know, that could be a little more creative. You know, maybe give him a different name and then make that the plot twist that, oh, Kalabar was your dad. Not my film, I just watch it. Something about Cal as well in this film, you might disagree with me if you've seen this film and you've seen the show I'm going to bring up, but he kind of reminded me of Marcus from Lab Rats. And if you're new to this channel, you're new to the Wild Review, I have kind of a history with Lab Rats. I just found the story to be very interesting. I liked how dark it got at sometimes, being a children's sitcom. But they had a character named Marcus who was essentially the main antagonist of the whole series. I first was like, he kind of looks like Marcus. And in some scenes he does. Like there's a scene with Cal's face showing up in a fireplace, and it does resemble the character Marcus a bit, or whoever Marcus is played by. I don't know the actor. Matt, I think his name is. I'm not sure. He also kind of sounds like him a little. And the way his character is, it definitely gave off similar characteristics to the character Marcus. I don't know, if you've seen Lab Rats and you've seen Halloweentown 2 and you completely disagree with me, that's fine. I'm just stating an opinion. So what's the final verdict? Did I enjoy it? Did I like it more than the first one? Kind of. Would I say it's a great film? No. In my opinion, the film does drag on just a little bit. I think we spend way too much time at Gort's house when they're doing a time traveling scene. Yes, there is time travel in this film. You know, it's like playing around with the spell to revert people from the gray spell back to normal. They spend, I think, a little too much time on that. They're having too much fun putting Gort as a normal human and then back to his creature way. You know, going over certain spells in his house, it's like, alright, let's move along here. Like, I know you probably have to fill up that hour-and-a-half time slot that you have on the Disney Channel, but it's like, you know, come on, let's move the story along, folks. It wasn't boring, it was definitely entertaining, but I did feel like some scenes could just easily be done quicker. It didn't need to go on as long as it did. I'm not saying it was too long. It's actually not a long film at all. It's only an hour and 20-something minutes. But just the context of the film, the way that certain scenes are, they can drag on a bit. There are some cheesy jokes, because it is a Disney Channel film. At the very end, there's an internet joke. Grandma Aggie's like, so what is this all about, the wide web? And, you know, there's still talks of training Marnie to become a full witch. Marnie at that point goes like, oh, Grandma, I think it's time we start training you on the wide web, or something like that. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, that happened. We made an old person meeting the internet joke. Also, something I don't understand in the film is Halloween. Just the way things go, and not in Halloweentown, but in the real world. What town, or I should say what school, holds a Halloween costume party on Halloween night a few hours after trick-or-treating hours and counts down to midnight and continues to party when it becomes November? I mean, to argue that the story took place on October 31st and the midnight scene transitioned over to Halloween night, which would make a little sense, we can't really argue with that, because the portal and access to Halloweentown, to the human world, really is only accessible on Halloween. And once it's midnight on Halloween, it closes, and you have to wait a whole year for it to open back up. That's also one of the main problems in the film. They were given limited time to fix this problem, or else Marnie wouldn't have been allowed to go back home until the next Halloween, which Halloweentown time is completely different than our time. So a year for us could be like a century for them. But it's like, what town does that? Who holds a massive Halloween costume party the night of Halloween? I don't get that. Yeah, with that said, that's all I got for Halloweentown 2. It was a pretty cool sequel. I enjoyed taking a trip down memory lane, like all of you are probably doing this week, if you grew up with Halloweentown, that is. I'm sorry I didn't grow up with it like majority of everybody who was a child when these things came out. I got it, I'm different. But that's all I gotta say about that. And now we're gonna move on to tomorrow, when we take a look at Halloweentown High. And I guess I should make this clear. I've been exposed to Halloweentown and Halloweentown 2, of course. But Halloweentown High and the sequel after that, the final movie in this series, Return to Halloweentown, those I don't actually have that much knowledge on. Like, I know a few things, like I know that kid from High School Musical is in it. I also know the girl who plays Marnie is not in the fourth movie for some reason, but we will get to that. I have seen trailers for these films though, but they are very vivid in my head. I can't picture them as well like I can picture the first two films. So the next 2 days are going to be pretty interesting because I'm going in completely blind to these films. I had a pretty good understanding of the first two films. These, I don't really know what I'm in for. I could expect that Halloweentown High, though, is going to take Marnie into a school in Halloweentown, because there was also a lot of talk in this film about Marnie training to be a proper witch. We'll see what happens with that, but that's going to be tomorrow. Let's see if that prediction holds up. With that said, thanks for watching The Wild Review on The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing. Come on, get your head straight. Come on.